25.14 has brought forth nerfs to some of the strongest solo carries from last patch, so we've got a bunch of new picks to feature in this one. So in today's video, we'll be breaking down 3 of the best champions for every single role. And let's be honest, picking the best champions is fun, but is that really enough on its own? I don't know about you, but locking in Vayne just because she's OP doesn't really help if you're lacking sufficient knowledge as an ADC. However, you can begin stomping your way out of low elo when using our brand new Bronze to Diamond course that goes hard in teaching you everything you need to know to succeed as an ADC, which will have you speedrunning any game below Diamond, using the tactics our multi-role challenger player Hector has used to climb to the apex of the ranked ladder. And that's just for ADC. Your mid lane OP Diana pick becomes actually unstoppable when you know all the essentials of mid lane thanks to the new 6-part mid lane series over on our platform that our top 10 challenger player Strompus has tirelessly worked on exclusive to our members. Our solo carry list gets you the right champions, SkillCapped gets you the right skills. And we're so confident it works, if you don't climb 5 divisions while actively using the platform, you literally don't pay a single cent. So why hold yourself back this season and finally get the rank you deserve? And with that being said, let's get into it. With Set dropping out of the top 3 due to his nerfs, taking his spot is going to be Quinn. Quinn has been very quietly one of the most broken top lane champs for a while now. How the champion plays just works so well for solo queue because she hard wins lane against most meta melee tops and then can transition into roaming and spreading her lead better than 99% of top laners. The meta build for Quinn amplifies her roaming strength even more because you rush Static Shiv, and with the item being relatively cheap at 2,700 gold, you're able to complete your first item faster than most melee top laners to spike before them. Shiv procs coupled with Quinn's R and Q damage will allow her to instant nuke waves so that she can quickly clear out side waves and then look for flank opportunities towards mid lane. The complete core build for Quinn consists of the Shiv Rush into Edge of Night 2nd and the Collector or Lord Dom's 3rd, while Electrocute is going to be the optimal Keystone rune. Important to note for your skill order if you're new to Quinn is that even though you max your W out first, you want to take your E at level 1. E start when up against a melee champion gives you the ability to very easily proc Electrocute if they walk up for farm, so you can get a massive chunk off at level 1 and take full control of the lane. Matchup wise for Quinn, Malphite is always a good band to consider as his armor stacking makes him more difficult to snowball off of. Back on the solo carry list for a second patch in a row, and the best AP bruiser that you can play right now is Mordekaiser. The Q damage buff from 25.12 has pushed Mord back into a top tier spot, and with the top laners like Riven and Set both nerfed for this patch, it brings even more relative power to Mord. Mordekaiser is one of the best skirmishing top lane champs in the entire game because of how he can turn a 1v2 scenario into a 1v1 with the click of his R. This makes the champion incredibly oppressive with the lead because the enemy team will need to send multiple members to deal with you in the side lane if they want to take you down. Builds right now for Mordekaiser are really nice as well because you have the option of going for Rocket Belt as it's much stronger due to its recent buffs. Rylai's and Riftmaker are standard first and second items for Mord, but for your third item, you can either slot in Liandry's against more tanky comps or Rocket Belt if up against squishies. The active dash from Rocket Belt feels super nice on Mord because you not only get to close the gap on your enemies, but you apply the Rylai's slow if the bolts hit, which helps you stick onto your target even better. Since Mord is a champ who lacks a gap closer, one top lane champ who can be a bit more annoying to play into is Yorick, as his W can completely halt you in your tracks and really limit your skirmish strength, so Yorick is a good band to consider. The rune page for Mordekaiser consists of Conqueror with Triumph, Haste, and Last Stand, while Bone Plating and Revitalize are for secondaries. A mainstay on the solo carry list for top lane who's back again for 25.14 is Kayle. Kayle is one of those top lane champs who's so rewarding to put the time into because her scaling strength is incredible. So if you can learn your matchups and be able to win lane, or at the very least go even throughout the early game, you'll have great impact over games. There are certain matchups like Jax that you will want to try and avoid, as his dodge mechanic with E does a good job at limiting your trading power as Kayle. Into a lot of other melee matchups, you can actually look to fight them at level 1 due to all the attack speed Kayle can stack up from lethal tempo and her passive. If you take Bone Plating and runes, then there are very few champs who can actually beat Kayle in a straight up 1v1 fight at level 1. If you can get to the point to where you're confident in your ability to trade at level 1, then it can really take your Kayle to another level, as hard winning lane with the champ just sets you up so easily to hard carry games. For Kayle's build, you should be running a Nashor's Tooth Rush into Rabadon 2nd and Lichbane 3rd. Lethal Tempo and Press the Attack are both viable keystone runes for Kayle. Lethal is going to work best in lanes where you're confident you'll be able to take extended trades, while PTA is going to work best if you're taking shorter trades. A jungler that is so easy to pick up and extremely powerful for 25.14 is Trundle. We've seen the champ gaining in popularity over the past few patches in both solo queue and pro play, and while his pick rate continues to rise, win rate remains incredibly high too. So from the analytical standpoint, there's really no better jungler than Trundle right now. One of Trundle's biggest strengths is his ability to go toe-to-toe with most other junglers in the 1v1 early game, so you've got a lot of agency over how the early game plays out. Especially if you're playing into a jungler who deals physical damage, you just shut them down so hard due to your Q reducing the enemy's AD. Over the past patch, Trundle has had above a 52% win rate or higher into all the most commonly played junglers in solo queue, like Lee Sin, Viego, Pantheon, Xin Zhao, Kayn, and Nocturne, so there's just so much value from the Trundle pick with how the jungle meta is aligned. We really aren't seeing AP junglers all that often right now, so it's great for Trundle. Using your ban on a meta peel support is never a bad idea when picking Trundle, since his main weakness is being kited in fights, so Lulu or Braum are two good ban options. The meta build for Trundle is going to consist of Trinity Force for the rush item into Deadman's Plate second, followed by Lethal Tempo or Press the Attack for the Keystone rune. Lethal is going to be best into tankier comps, while PTA will be of more value into squishies. The jungle meta is really good right now if you're someone who's not the most mechanically gifted, as we had Trundle for our first pick and is going to be Volibear as our second selection. Much like Trundle, Volibear has a pretty underrated early game skirmish, as you take Lethal Tempo and will outlast most junglers in extended fights. The extended fight power of Volibear becomes especially good when you reach the mid game, because his 2-item core of Cosmic Drive and Flicker Blades puts his abilities on such short cooldowns. All the movement speed you've got with your setup also feels amazing on Volibear, as Cosmic Drive provides 4%, Flicker Blades also gives 4%, you get a bunch from going Swiftness Boots, and then taking a Gust Walker as your starting item gives you additional movement speed while in Brush, so you get around the map very quickly with Volley in the mid game. In solo queue, being on the map and in the right place at the right time is so important, so this setup is absolutely perfect in so many ways for Volley. In regards to Volley's matchups, Trundle is one matchup in meta that can be a lot more volatile to play into, so using your ban on him is a good idea right now. The full rune page you should be running consists of Lethal Tempo with Triumph, Haste, and Last Stand, followed by Free Boots and Jack of all trades for secondaries. So Trundle and Volibear are both incredibly strong junglers, especially if played into more melee heavy comps, but if the enemy comp locks a longer range composition, then Jarvan is the superior pick right now. Jarvan's long range engage gives him backline access into pretty much any champion, as even long range artillery picks like Vel'Koz and Xerath can't fend off against a Jarvan who's got flash and can dive in from 2 screens away. Picking Jarvan in a game where the enemy comp has at least one carry who lacks a gap closer is going to be ideal, because it will make ganking that lane super easy when you get level 6. Being that Jarvan is one of the best ganking junglers, you really need to have a game plan as to which lane you'll want to prioritize. Whichever lane has the most reliable crowd control is generally going to be the best lane for you to gank, but taking into account whether or not the enemy team has dashes is also something to think about. Junglers who have dashes are who you'll want to try and avoid playing into, and one in specific who can be quite annoying is Kindred. Kindred not only has the mobility from their Q, but they have the stalling power from R, which makes finding picks with Jarvan very difficult in the matchup. There are currently 2 meta builds going around on Jarvan. The first one is standard Bruiser with Eclipse into Sundered Sky that you really can't go wrong with, and then secondly, you've got a lethality core of Opportunity into Profane Hydra that has been on the rise recently. So the Bruiser build is all around solid in all situations, while the lethality setup should be prioritized when up against a heavy, squishy enemy comp. As for the rune page, it's going to be Conqueror with Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, followed by Free Boots and Cosmic Insight for secondaries. In terms of mid lane mages for solo queue right now, with Twisted Fate nerfed for this patch, taking his spot on the solo carry list is Hui. Hui is an incredible mid lane champion for solo queue because it's very difficult to exploit him early on in lane, and especially once he gets a few points in queue, he can just spam out his QE on the wave and perma push, which has very little counterplay. The fact that Hui QE sits on the ground in such a large AoE and slows if enemies walk into it provides him with so much safety when he's shoving out waves, so as long as you're spacing well with Hui in lane, it's super hard for enemies to punish you. The teamfight impact of Hui is absolutely top tier as well, with his R providing so much value in a grouped up fight, and his basic abilities providing a bunch of AoE damage as well. Even though the champ does have a slightly higher skill floor than most other mid laners due to having 9 different options for basic abilities, it really doesn't take as long as you'd expect to get a general grasp of Hui and begin impacting games. The meta build for Hui revolves around his 2 core items being Blackfire and Liandry's, while it's pretty situational from then on out. Champs who do have a ton of mobility are who Hui is going to struggle against a bit more, so banning out Yasuo or Katarina is good value. The best rune setup for Hui consists of Comet with Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch, while Haste and Cut Down are for secondaries. A mid lane champ who's gaining some power for this patch, who's already been a very solid pickup as of recent, is Katarina. AD builds become indirectly stronger on Cat for 25.14 with the buffs to Blade of the Ruined King and Kraken Slayer, as those are the 2 core items you run with on-hit Cat. So the champ becomes a bit more versatile because if your top and jungle both lock AP, then you can pivot to AD and not be too heavy in one damage type. AD likely doesn't become the outright best build for Katarina, but in select spots, it's become more appealing now. The AP build of Lichbane into Shadowflame will remain as Cat's standard setup. Matchup-wise for Cat right now, she's always going to have a more difficult time playing into champs who have easy to hit crowd control, which makes playing out teamfights much more difficult. Galio and Malzahar are 2 of those champs that can be more frustrating come the mid game, so using your ban on either is good value. For Katarina's rune page, you should be taking Electrocute with Sudden Impact, Grizzly Mementos, and Relentless Hunter, while Triumph and Coup de Grace are for secondaries. secondaries. A mainstay on the mid lane solo carry list for a while now, and rounding out the top 3 for 25.14 is Diana. Diana is the best mid lane assassin that you can pick for solo queue right now because she is much less punishable early on in lane than most other assassins and can use that to her advantage to strike for aggressive trades at level 3. When you have all 3 of your spells available, the trading strength of Diana is incredible, and few mid laners can actually match that quick burst threat that Diana has to offer. Especially if you have your bone plating up as well, taking a quick trade against the enemy is going to swing in your favor more often than not. One matchup where trading aggressively at level 3 is a bit harder is against Galio, as his spell shield and point and click taunt limit Diana's burst power, so Galio is a good ban to consider if picking up Diana. The standard 2-item core for Diana consists of Storm Surge into Shadow Flame. However, you can run a Rocket Belt Rush to provide yourself with more durability if you're playing into more of a bruiser or tank comp that will be harder to one-shot. For the rune page, you should be taking Electrocute with Sudden Impact, Grizzly Mementos, and Treasure Hunter, while Bone Plating and Shield Bash are generally the best secondaries. However, if you are in a ranged matchup where the enemy can very easily get rid of your Bone Plating by poking you in lane, then going for Sorcery secondary with Mana Flow and Scorch is an option as well. An ADC who continues to climb in priority and kicking off the top 3 for 25.14 is Sivir. Sivir is an all-around phenomenal solo queue pick right now because of how consistently impactful you can be on the pick. The shoving power with Sivir's Q and W allows her to neutralize most matchups as you outpush the majority of ADCs early on and can acquire priority in lane. Once you get your first item, farming with Sivir becomes absolutely effortless as you just nuke waves with your Q and W, which allows you to amass big CS leads over the enemy ADC. If you can consistently hit over 8 CS per minute with Sivir and be at objectives before they spawn to be ready to teamfight, then in even or winning game states, you're going to find success with the champ. Just pressing R in a fight can be so impactful with Sivir if your team is playing a heavy melee dive comp, as enabling your teammates to access the enemy backline is just such a big boost. Stop running Essence Reaver on Sivir if you have been lately, as the 2-item core of Yuntal and Infinity Edge is just way too good to pass up on. The DPS of this 2-item core is far superior to anything else, and we know this because of all the testing we did when creating our ADC itemization course, where we have the complete rundown of optimal builds for every single ADC in the game. For the rune page on Sivir, what's winning the most right now consists of Lethal Tempo for the Keystone rune with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, and Cutdown, followed by Free Boots and Biscuits for secondaries. Since Sivir lacks a gap closer, she is more vulnerable to heavy dive comps, so using her ban on Jarvan is never a bad idea. A new addition to the ADC top 3 for this patch who's going to indirectly benefit from the item changes is Vayne. Both of Vayne's 2 most commonly bought items have been buffed in 25.14, with Blade of the Rune King and Kraken Slayer gaining power. In recent patches, Vayne was already one of the better performing ADCs in solo queue, so these buffs will just make her a solidified top tier pick. The support meta is aligned quite well right now for Vayne as well, with enchanters being prioritized more often than melee supports, as Nami, Lulu, and Karma are 3 of the most played supports. Vayne is always going to have a bit more difficult time in lane in certain matchups, as her shorter range does make it more tricky to play into picks like Karma or Caitlyn, so using your ban on one of them is a good idea. You actually have 3 different options for your build on Vayne right now. Blade of the Ruined King Rush is the most common, and you can't really go wrong with it. Kraken Rush is going to provide slightly more DPS than Blade, so if you don't feel like you need the sustain that Blade provides, going more offensive with Kraken is a good idea. And then the crit build is viable too, and it's going to work best for you in games where the enemy comp is majority squishy. Phantom Dancer is even buffed for this patch, so literally every single Vayne build that you can run got better for 25.14. For Vayne's rune page, you want to be taking Lethal Tempo with Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, followed by Conditioning and Overgrowth for secondaries. And then to round out the top 3 for ADC in 25.14, it's going to be Kog'Maw. So Kog'Maw is already a really weird champ to get a read on for solo queue because he consistently holds the highest win rate for ADC, but is never played at a very high rate unless he's actually considered broken. Well, for 25.14, Kog could be entering that broken state, as Blade of the Ruined King buffs will be helping him out. Kog already had a 53% win rate in 25.13, so with Blade buffed, a 1% boost to that wouldn't be all that surprising, and you just can't ignore Kog'Maw anymore if that's the case. Now, key to note is that the best build for Kog'Maw actually doesn't involve rushing Blade. Rage Blade Rush is much better on Kog if you're paired up with an enchanter support, as the DPS potential on one item is much better with Rage Blade. If you are with a melee support and are in a more difficult lane, you can still rush Blade for the sustain, but you definitely shouldn't be rushing Blade of the Ruined King in every single game. Like we mentioned when covering Vayne, the support meta is primarily enchanters at the top right now, so that plays into Kog'Maw's hands really well. Being an ADC who lacks any sort of mobility spell, using your ban on a meta dive champ like Jarvan is always good value. For Kog'Maw's rune page, you should be taking Lethal Tempo with Triumph, Bloodline, and Last Stand, while Conditioning and Overgrowth are the best secondaries. The best enchanter that you can play for solo queue right now, and one of the best supports in general, is Melio. The barrier to entry on Melio is very low, as it doesn't take much skill at all to be impactful with the champ. You've got the utility from E and W to help buff up your carries, and then your Q offers up a nice harass tool for lane that gives Melio some great lane presence. Especially if you're playing up against a melee support, Melio's Q is super impactful because it can not only be used as a poke tool, but as a disengage tool as well. You get the knockback when hitting an enemy, so when playing into picks like Leona, Rakan, Alistar, or Rel, if they try to dive in on your ADC, you've got some instant peel power to help your ADC kite back. Melio is one of the best supports at absorbing that initial dive from enemies and then turning fights around in his team's favor. At level 6, you've got the cleanse effect from R, so it makes the champ so valuable into any engaged support, as you just sit back at a safe distance and use the spell on one of your carries if they get engaged on. The one kind of CC that Emilio R cannot help against is a long-range Blitz hook, so it is one champ who's worth considering banning when picking Melio. Blitz does have the shield breaker mechanic with his R as well, so a lot of Melio's kit is nullified if Blitz is able to land his hook. A couple of ADCs that are especially strong when paired up with Melio include Lucian, Sivir, Vayne, and Ashe. Lucian is the most common duo for Melio, but Ashe is actually who's been winning the most with him, and it makes a lot of sense. As we mentioned earlier, Melio is one of the best supports at fending off that initial dive from enemies, and if you can do that, then the Ashe gets to turn the fight in her favor, re-engaging with her R and chasing the enemies down after they've wasted their spells. The standard build for Melio consists of Dreammaker for the item upgrade, with Echoes of Helia and Moonstone as core purchases, and then Summon Aerie is the Keystone rune. With Braum nerfed for this patch and dropping out of the top 3, taking his place is going to be Bard. Bard is in a really good spot for solo queue right now, as his meta build gives him a lot of carry power. Electrocute is the Keystone rune, and then you take Bloodsong for the item upgrade, followed by Deadman's Plate and Liandry's as core items. So there's just so much damage coming out of this build while giving Bard a lot of durability at the same time. This allows for Bard to play up nice and aggressive, constantly weaving in auto attacks to proc his passive damage and just being a huge annoyance in fights. Bard's early laning is one of his weaknesses, so using your ban on a strong early game support like Karma is a good idea. Choosing correct roam timings is so important to get the most out of Bard, so definitely check out our new video we just uploaded to our website on roam timers for support if you're looking to maximize Bard's potential. Whenever you have the enemy bot lane shoved in under tower is going to be one of the better times to look for a roam towards mid. If you notice the enemy mid laner is either pushed up too far or they are super low on health, then pinging your ADC back and looking for a quick roam towards mid should be on your radar. And then to round out the top 3 for support is a champion who just continues to excel patch after patch, as we've got Nami. What's so great about Nami is that she's pretty easy to pick up and be impactful on right away, but you also get rewarded quite a bit for mastering the champion, so she's a really good support to learn. What we mean by this is that by simply throwing out W and E on your carries, you're going to provide great value to your team, but landing Q and R on a consistent basis is a lot harder and will take some fine tuning, but will really take your Nami to another level. In the mid game, a lot of your power is just going to come from having Imperial Mandate completed and putting your E on your ADC. The amount of DPS your ADC can deal with those first couple of autos hits really hard and gives you the ability to chunk a target out super fast at the beginning of a fight. In lanes where the enemy duo lacks any sort of reliable catch and burst strength, Nami can absolutely excel due to her constant heals from W. Remember, even trades are actually winning trades early on with Nami if the enemy support does not have a heal themselves. The only thing that can really prevent Nami from thriving in lane is that instant catch where you can't exploit your heals, so banning out Blitzcrank is never a bad idea. The optimal rune setup for Nami consists of Aerie with Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch, while Bone Plating and Revitalize are for secondaries. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, that is a complete look at 3 of the best champions for every single role as we head into 25.14. Thank you all so much for watching, we'll see you in the next one.